Am I audible now? Yeah, this is better. Okay, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. Let's start the session for today. I will myself, Dr. Nitin Dande, orthopedic surgeon and medical legal expert. I am based at Jalgaon. Okay, I've started the sharing my screen. Yeah, stop sharing. Here it is full screen. Okay. Is the screen visible now? Ma'am, you may speak as well. I think a few of the participants have joined here. मॅम स्क्रीन विजिबल आहे का माझा? हॅलो. ओके ओके आहे विजिबल दिसलं मला. Okay, so let's start the session. I will introduce myself in short. Myself, Dr. Nitin Dhande from Jalgaon. I am orthopedic surgeon practicing in Jalgaon since last 17 to 18 years and medical legal expert here at Jalgaon. I am also co-chairman for IMA, Medical Legal Committee of Maharashtra State Maharashtra State IMA. What is the consent? The most important topic today. We are going to discuss the most important topic today, that is consent. Consent is the thing which is required for each and every medical procedure or otherwise. So what is the consent? According to us, permission देणे किंवा ठीक आहे हो म्हणणे, that is consent. But according to the law, there are few criteria. Actually, doctor-patient relationship or consent, it is a contract. Consent is a contract between doctor and the patient. So what is a contract? According to law, contract is all these five things. Willingness to do or abstain from doing something is the criteria. When this is accepted, it becomes a proposal. Say, suppose I say I will do this and I tell to somebody, then that becomes a proposal. When the proposal is accepted, it becomes a promise. When the samne wala says, ki, okay, I accept your proposal, then that becomes a promise for me. When there is some consideration for the promise, I means when he is going to pay me something or I would earn something from that, that is called as consideration. When there is consideration to the promise, it becomes an agreement. And the enforceable agreement by the law becomes a contract. Okay. So what is a consent? It is a contract between doctor and patient, stating that doctor is going to do something for the patient which patient accepts. And there is some consideration. According to Indian Contract Act, when two parties or two person agree upon same thing in same sense, then that becomes a consent. Okay. Means like the philosophers, what I am going to say, I am responsible for what I say, and I am not responsible for what you understand. Then that is absolutely foolish. That is not at all a consent. When doctor is going to say something, a patient should understand what he is saying and what he mean he is saying. डॉक्टर कुछ कह रहा है, पेशेंट को कुछ अलग समझ में आ रहा है, and then he agrees this, that is not a consent. Okay, same thing in same sense, both of the parties should agree. Consent is not a one off event. ठीक है भाई, जाके एक बार साइन ले ले, काम खत्म हो जाएगा. No, that is not a one time event. That is a process of communication which starts since the patient getting admitted in the hospital. Say patient gets admitted in the hospital on your suggestion, that means he is ready to accept whatever you tell him. He is ready to accept the treatment you give him. See, consent started. This is the one of the criteria. Okay. The consent should always be free consent. according to the Section 14 of Indian Contract Act, free consent, without any pressure, without any undue influence, without any coercion, without any fraud, without any misrepresentation, and without any mistake. When all these five criteria are fulfilled, then we may say that consent is a free consent. For a valid consent, it should be free. Only the free consent means the consent which is given freely by the patient on his will is the valid consent. All these criteria have to be fulfilled. Now one will say, what are these criteria? Why is we going to discuss in the medical thing or in the treatment of the patient? Because when something different happens, when something untoward thing happens, all these five things come in picture. Patient will say, कि मुझे तो मालूम ही नहीं था, I was misrepresented. The patient will say, nahi, 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 there was a mistake. I understood different and doctor was saying different. Then that becomes a mistake. Patient would say, nahi, I was under influence and I don't know what doctor was saying. Then all these five criteria come into the force when some untoward thing happen and when patient goes in the court. So these five things are important. Now see this section 88. That is according to IPC, which now has become BNS. Anything act not intended to cause death done by consent in good faith for the person is consent. What is good faith? Is there something like good faith? Is there something written like good faith? Yes. Section 52, last line. Last line is said, anything which is done with due care and attention is a good faith. Anything which is done with due care and attention is said to be done in good faith. So every doctor is going to have good faith. No doctor wants his patient to be not to be cured or something like that. Everybody wants him to be getting well soon and get cured immediately or as early as possible. So all the things doctor do is done in a good faith. Here come definition of good faith, which is done without due care and attention. Anything which is done without due care and attention is good faith. These are different sections. Now BNS has come in since last 2 years. IPC sections have get converted into the different number and sections. Why is consent required? Consent is required for each and every procedure because every individual has his own autonomy and his self-determination and his self-rights. Every person has full right of his own body. Okay, any doctor is going to treat the body of a patient and the body belongs to the patient. When he say, okay, you do it, then and then only we can do it. And that's why consent is always required because we are going to deal with his body. Essentials of valid consent. We already saw the five essentials. That is free, voluntary, no misrepresentation, no mistake, no undue influence, and no coercion. Another few criteria are he should have attained the age of maturity, which is 18 years in our India. 18 years according to the Minority Act, 18 years is the age of maturity in India. When the patient gives consent, he should be of sound mind. He should not be disqualified by any law in force. It should be given free and voluntary. Few other essentials are consent must take before commencing the procedure. Most important thing, we have a lot of cases due to this. Consent should be taken before commencing the procedure, not in the operation theatre or not after giving any type of drugs. Consent has to be started mind well before commencing the procedure. जब patient ward में है या OPD में है या admit हो रहा है, then and then you have to tell him and explain all the things. Valid consent is the only one when patient himself gives it. Okay, if person is minor, he cannot give consent. If he is less than 18 years age but more than 12 years of age, then he can give consent for only examination. Okay, below 12 years, guardian signs or parent signs is required. Only and only in emergency life-saving procedures, consent may not be required. Please mind well. Must not be a blanket consent. It is not valid. Blanket means what? Usually the consent which everybody takes, that is the printed on the paper, on the letterhead of the hospital, or there is name of the hospital and everything is already printed, leaving the spaces for doctor and anesthesia and patient's name and procedure. This is to state that Dr. Nitin Dande is going to treat XYZ patient for fractured tibia under XYZ anesthesia. Already it is written, only 4 things are to be written. That is a blanket consent, absolutely not void, not valid. Important points of valid consent: it should be procedure specific. If you are going to say, if I am going to operate for a perforation of intestine, then you have to do only perforation of intestine. Even if you see that appendix is to be removed, or maybe अरे सामने ही निकाल लेते, 2 मिनट का काम है, no, you have to take the consent for the specific procedure, and you have to do only the procedure for which consent is taken. It must be properly documented. Most important thing is documentation. Nowadays video recording may be done, but with the permission or with the consent of patient, or knowing, telling the patient that all the things we are going to discuss is being video recorded. Except in emergency, when life saving, there may not be required any consent prior or after the procedure. Consent remains valid for indefinite period according to the law. Okay, according to law, consent remains valid for indefinite period provided all the parameters remain same. The most important line. Say suppose I was going to operate the patient today afternoon, and due to any reasons I cancelled the procedure and I'm going to operate tomorrow morning, then we have to take the new consent, ideally, because there was some change in the parameter. That's why the operation was cancelled. Whatever the parameters were, either he was having BP, or his sugar was raised, or his relatives were not there, or anesthetist said we will do tomorrow, whatever the reason, parameter changed, so you postpone the case, so you have to take new consent. Consent from the spouse is required, rather most important and essential, if the surgery or if the procedure is going to affect sexual or reproductive functions. Only consent of lady for pubectomy is not valid. Only for abortion or maybe MTP, the consent of spouse is valid, but not for the activities which affect the sexual and reproductive functions. And the last line is important. There should be no overwriting, blank spaces, additions, deletions, alterations, or erasures in the consent form. Once written, written. If you have to write something new, get a new paper and write a new consent. Important points again. Disclosure of full information. Most important thing. क्या बीमारी है? What is the condition? What is the diagnosis? What are you going to do? How are you going to do? What are the alternatives? What if nothing is done? What is the prognosis? What are the costs? What if the patient refuses to do the procedure? Everything has to be explained to the patient, and then only the consent becomes a valid consent. And all these things are to be documented. Documentation is most important. मैंने तो बोला था, but what proof you have? So documentation is needed. Encourage for queries. Most important thing. Let the patient speak. Encourage his queries. One or two or three queries he would have, not more than that. And once they are solved, he is very satisfied. Patient satisfaction is the most important thing to prevent the violence. Okay, next thing is patient is free to withdraw his consent anytime. I mean anytime. Even if the patient is on operation theatre and under anesthesia, say spinal is given and patient say I don't want, then you have to cancel the procedure, which has happened with me one time. Witness consent are more dependable, always there. You have to take the sign of a witness. Competent patient has legal and moral right to competent patient has legal and moral right to refuse the treatment. Any patient has the right to refuse the treatment you are going to do, because the body is owned by the patient and he has whole right for his body. Only thing you have to do is document it well. Surgical consent is not valid for anesthesia. You have to take a different consent for anesthesia. How many to take the consent of for anesthesia? You have to take. Anesthetist himself has to take the different consent. These are the few case laws which shows various validity or the essentials of the consent. Samira Kohli and Prabha Manchanda, landmark judgment, in which the surgeon operated the patient, Mrs. Samira. She was 24 years old. She was 44 years of age, and her hysteroscopy was going to be done. When they saw, they decided to do the hysterectomy as well. Patient was under anesthesia, and this was informed to her mother. we are going to do hysterectomy. Mother consented and hysterectomy was done, which later patient came to know and she filed a suit against the doctor. Consent obtained during surgical procedure is not acceptable. Patient is under anesthesia and he may not be able to give his consent properly. Fresh consent for repeat or different procedure, as we saw. Separate consent for blood transfusion is must. Mind well. Anesthesia consent is must. Blood transfusion consent is must. Separate consent for examining or observing patient for educational purpose is also required. Say, suppose you are going to present a case of that particular disease, then you have to take the consent of the patient that I am going to present your case or your name, or he may say, no, 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 not, don't take my name. Then you have to tell him that things. Unilaterally executed consent is void. Only patient sign or only doctor sign is not valid. ओके हम लोग क्या करते हैं, कंसेंट प्रिंटेड है, ब्लैंकेट है, पेशेंट का साइन ले लिया, काम खत्म. नो, doctor has to sign on the consent, patient has to sign on the consent, and two witnesses are must that the sign is of that particular person. Witness has nothing to do with the content of the consent. Witness is only to witness that the signs are made in front of him. In emergency, no consent is required. Who should obtain the consent? Ideally, the person who is going to treat, who is going to operate, is the only person who should take consent. But the things are that person who is capable of communicating the necessary information can also take the consent. Though it remains unclear, nothing proved whether the intern or the houseman can take the consent. Staff or nurses are not entitled to obtain any type of consent. However, they can be the mediator in between to communicate the language barrier or the communication gap if there is. Who can give consent? By now, you should be able to guess that patient only can give his consent. Every person who is competent to contract according to the age of majority can give the consent. Legal age at Indian Majority Act is 18 years. In between 12 to 18 years, consent is only for examination and not for procedure. You have to obtain the consent from the parents. And for orphans or unknown or street children, court is appointed as guardian and the consent of court is needed. Consent is essential for any procedure which needs anesthesia, or even for the procedures which may not need anesthesia. Invasive procedure. Suppose in the OPD you are going to give intramuscular injection. It is an invasive procedure. Ideally, you have to take the consent. पूरा कागज भरने का, मैं इंजेक्शन देने वाला हूँ, उसमें एलर्जी हो सकता है, ये हो सकता है, वो सकता है, आपकी मौत हो सकती है, एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. Who is going to take the treatment then? But then these things only happen when something goes untoward, something goes wrong. When the cases are done, then all the things comes. For blood transfusion, for anesthesia, you have to take different consent. For termination of pregnancy, consent from the mother, the woman is must. Special risk and special procedure consents are different. What is the role of hospital? Now corporate hospitals have cropped up. Hospital definitely have the full role in the consent because it is the theory of respondent superior. An employer hospital is responsible for their employees. So usually all these big hospitals have fixed policy. There is some hospital policy for particular that hospital, or they follow some criteria and rules as per the written orders. And that is the basic. For everything, for every procedure, there should be fixed pro forma and which has to be followed. So there are very less chances that anything will be missed. Last line again here is most important thing. If the patient admitted in hospital, it is obligation of the hospital to make sure that no member of the hospital staff performs the refused procedure. That is the negative consent you may say. Say suppose a patient has told, say patient support is going to treated by 3 or 4 doctors and he has refused some particular procedure for one doctor, then it is the responsibility of the hospital that no other doctor should perform that procedure. So the following are the points for a good consent. It has to be patient specific, habit specific, like alcoholic or tobacco chewer or any other drug addicts or specific habit. Hospital specific, depending on the hospital, private or government hospitals, corporate hospitals. Doctor specific, diagnosis specific, disease severity specific, like stage 1 of cancer or maybe stage 4 or cancer or whatever. Anesthesia specific, type, procedure type specific. You are doing laparoscopy, you have taken the consent for laparoscopy, then you are not going to do the open surgery unless and otherwise there is written in the consent here, if needed I may open it. If you have not written, don't do it. This is a procedure type specific. Comorbidity specific, comorbidity control specific, like diabetes is a comorbidity. Controlled diabetes hai, risk will become. Uncontrolled diabetes hai, 500 sugar hai, patient is not going to listen, then risk changes. Consent is not required for following things. In emergency, except for life-saving procedures, no consent is required. Medico-legal cases brought by police for examination. For insurance policies, prisoners, new entrants, no consent is required. Under court order, if somebody is told to be examined, then no consent is required. Written request by police officer under section 53, then no consent is required. That is the same thing like medical legal cases brought by police. Person suffering from notifiable disease, there are few notifiable diseases which may cause the hazards to the community. So in the interest of community, notifiable diseases may be informed to the respective authorities without the consent of the patient. Immigrants is a totally different thing. They have a very different criteria and consent criteria as well and treatment criteria as well. Common mistakes we do, we consider consent what very trivial. अरे सिस्टर जाओ आप कंसेंट ले आओ. अरे भाई कंसेंट लिया है क्या? हाँ भाई ठीक है साइन हो गया, रख दो पेपर में. It is not a trivial thing. It is not a trivial thing. It is a legal mandatory procedure. Consent for relatives, even though patient can give it. This is the mistake. हाँ पापा है, पापा ने बोल दिया है, कंसेंट ले लिया है, बट सन इज मैच्योर. Father cannot give consent if he is above 18 years. Only patient can give consent. Consenting from the person who is intoxicated, impaired consciousness or minor. These three things are not a valid consent. Intoxicated or under influence, impaired consciousness and minor. Blanket consent is a mistake, not procedure specific. हाँ ठीक है, डॉक्टर नितिन दांडे XYZ को टीबिया का फ्रैक्चर किसी न किसी एनेस्थीसिया में कुछ ना कुछ सर्जरी करके ऑपरेट करने वाले हैं. दिस इज अ blanket consent, not procedure specific, absolutely useless. Fresh consent is not taken for a repeat procedure. You are going to repeat the procedure or change the time or prepone, postpone. You have to take different consents. No documentation is the very important and the most disastrous thing for a hospital or for a doctor. Whatever you write, whatever you tell, whatever you discuss, document it. Lack signature of treating doctors, no witness. All these are common mistakes which we commonly do. Now comes the types of consent. Implied consent, which is implied. Consider होता है हाँ भाई ये है, ये करने वाले हैं. So for example, patient OPD में आया आपको दिखाने के लिए, he is having fever. It is considered, it is implied that you are going to touch him or her. You are going to examine him. You are going to touch the body of the patient. That is implied consent. Sometime just now I said कि intramuscular injection डाइक्लोफेनाक OPD में देना है. Most of the time it is implied. कि patient बोल रहा है कि injection दे दो या कुछ दवाई दे दो. But then, as I said, the problem starts when something untoward happens. Expressed consent. It may be oral or it may be written. The best thing is written informed consent. Proxy or substitute consent is like the patient appointing a proxy, like a power of attorney. मैं नितिन है, मैं कंसेंट नहीं देने वाला हूँ. I give all the authorities to my brother and he is going to do whatever he wants, whatever he say, and I will agree. This is the proxy consent. And real consent. Real consent is just like written informed consent. In England, they call it real consent. Implied consent, implied by patient's conduct. Just now what I said, if he comes in procedure, you are going to touch him, you are going to auscultate his chest, you are going to take his BP, measure his temperature in axilla or maybe in mouth. All these are implied consents. But they are valid only for very routine examination and treatment. Say suppose for examination gynec. In gynec examination, per vaginal examination is a very routine procedure. But then that is not an implied thing. That is intimate examination. Ideally, you should take the consent or at least oral. You should explain it. Informed consent must have all elements of valid consent which we saw. 5-6 elements. 4 components. Mental capacity उसका अच्छा होना चाहिए patient का. Complete information is to be given by doctor to the patient. Avoid technical language. Avoid and explain in his own language. Always it is better to talk in patient's own language if you are able to talk with him. Voluntary acceptance by patient and personal procedure specific. Informed consent should contain all the things like date and time of consent, date of birth of the person, his name, his full name, witness, relative sign, legal guardians, signature of doctors, diagnosis, disease, in simple language, surgical details like procedures done or may be done or may not be done or not done, why not done, alternative to the procedures, prognosis, his refusal, complications, everything ideally should be written in the consent. And then only it becomes a written informed consent. Diagnosis, all the things again we all saw. Estimate of expenses is the most important thing nowadays because 80 or 90% violence start when the bills and when the expenses are told to the patient. So you beforehand tell him कि आपको 10 लाख रुपया लगने वाला है, आपको 10 रुपए में काम हो जाएगा, whatever it is. It is better to give him a clear and cut and perfect idea of the expenses. Maybe 19-20 चलेगा, पर 20 और 40 नहीं होना चाहिए. Then patient gets irritated and then all the violence starts. Always, if you have any doubt that patient is going to create some problem or some nuisance, better let him go to the another doctor. Better let him go to your competitor. That is better. Let him handle whatever he can. कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. If you are good, if your treatment is good, patient are going to come. Estimate of approximate hospital stay, period of disability is also to be given. The effect of no treatment or refusal of the procedure has to be explained to the patient very well. Exceptions to informed consent. Now again there are exceptions to the consent. Doctrine of therapeutic procedures. Certain procedural details may be difficult to explain the patient or he may not himself want the detail. Then you may not explain them. Say suppose a patient say कि ठीक है मुझे नहीं बताना आपको जो कुछ रिस्क बताना है मेरे लड़के को बताओ मेरे मम्मा पापा को बताओ मुझे नहीं बताओ. You write, you document it. You document it. Patient do not want to know the details, so the details are explained to the family members. Doctrine of emergency, as we saw, in emergency consent may not be required. Incompetence like delirious or unconscious state, senile age, psychotic, then it has exception, then that cannot be valid consent. Therapeutic privilege, doctrine of full disclosure and can expose to obtain. Doctor should explain the full details to the patient about his treatment and diagnosis and prognosis, which we never do. We say I am very busy and आपको बोल दिया ना एक बार समझ में नहीं आता है क्या, then patient become irritated. Doctor should not lie, like giving a guarantee for any procedure. नहीं नहीं 100% ठीक हो जाएगा. I would like to tell that there are some Supreme Court cases in which doctors have got a fine, huge fine, rather not fine, just for saying कि guarantee है अच्छा हो जाएगा. Nowadays it happens many times. The patient come from 2 or 3 doctors and then 4th doctor tell हाँ guarantee से बोलता हूँ अच्छा हो जाएगा. Never say this. Patient is going to record this. He is already recording whatever you say. Already, you always consider कि जो भी patient आ रहा है, he is going to record your voice or he is going to have a video inside his pocket. He is having whatever, yeah, anything. Always consider what. Now even this meeting is being recorded. Exceptions to informed consent. Doctrines of locus parentis. I don't know how much it is valid, but in emergency, the person who brings the patient is responsible for the consent. If the patient indicates the preference not to be informed, do document this very well. How to improve the consent? Make a good rapport with patient. Simplify your language. Let the patient understand what you are going to tell. Use interpreter if there is language problem. Another thing is encourage queries. Allow the time for his question. He is not a medical person. He is not going to digest anything what you tell immediately. He is going to have some doubts. Let his doubt cures. Let his doubt get solved. Let the patient understand and comprehend everything, and then you take his consent. How to improve consent? A, B, C, D, E, F. These are the mnemonics. Alternative therapies. Tell him benefit of the therapy. Tell him common risks which are not devastating. Tell him. Also tell him the devastating risks usually, or the we may say rare risks. Extra consideration specific to this patient, like if he's having diabetes, he's too much obese or whatever it is, and your facial languages and expression, body language, most important thing. By the way, in communication, only 8 to 9% thing depends on what you say by your mouth. All other 90% communication is your facial expression, your body language, and whatever you are going to do and how you are going to do. Coming back to our informed consent, keep the record of referrals. Better give referral 2 copies, one to the patient and one in the file. Avoid giving guarantees, just now what we saw. Informed refusal. Patient should be competent. Yes, right. If patient is competent to give the consent, he should be equally competent to refuse the procedure as well. He should be of sound mind and document it. Proxy consent. Proxy considered is the process by which people with legal right to consent to medical treatment for themselves or for minor delegate the right to another person. Like I'm Dr. Nitin, I'm mature adult more than 18 years of age, so I have all the rights to give the consent, but I give my all rights to my brother or sister or parents. That is the delegation of the right. That is proxy consent. Now here comes the another criteria. The person you are going to delegate the rights, he should be also competent equally. There are 3 fundamental constraints on these delegations. The person making the delegation must have the right to consent. The person must be legally and medically competent to delegate the right. The right to consent must be delegated to legally and medically competent adult. All the 3 consent. When I give the I delegate the rights, I should be competent to delegate the rights. Proxy consent. There are 2 types of proxy consent, like the power of attorney. Exactly what we do for property or पैसे के लिए जो power of attorney होता है, same thing is for medical care. And the second is living will. Living will is totally different topic. We'll see next time. Special consideration for the consent will be for child who cannot give consent, unconscious patient, consent not required only for life-saving emergency procedure, mental illness, no consent should be taken. I mean, no consent. He will not give any consent. You have to explain to his parents or his guardians or whoever they are. Obs gynae cases nowadays, we considering the POCSO Act, it becomes very important to take all the consents properly, especially age, which should be taken with the Aadhaar proof. We have on Play Store you have a app from government UPI that Aadhaar which can scan the barcode and give the information of the Aadhaar card. In emergencies, special request DNR, do not resuscitate. This is the special type of consent which you have to take daily. Suppose patient or his relatives say do not resuscitate this patient, then all the medical criteria according to the law has to be followed. But every morning or every day, this consent has to be taken and renewed. Jehovah's Witness are the special community or special people who are never willing to accept the blood. They always refuse to take the blood. They will die, but not take any blood transfusion. Then this becomes a special consideration. High risk admissions, high risk surgeries, removal of limb or body part, risk of DOT, permanent sterilization. Obviously, both partners should consent. Multiple surgeries if anticipated. Then tell him at the first surgery you may need another surgery or you may need more than 2 surgeries. Refusal of the consent has to be documented. Left against medical advice. Clinical trials and HIV test. HIV test, ideally, consent has to be obtained. which we usually do not take. Special laws, Transplant of Human Organ Act, PCPNDT Act, MTP Act, and now we can add POXO, clinical trials, publishing photographs, everything. For all these things, consent had to be taken properly. Logistic difficulties, I'll just skip it. Logistic difficulties means patient may not be familiar with the doctor's role, or he may not know who is the doctor. There may be a language barrier, or there may be a religious barrier, there may be a cultural barrier, lack of communication skills in the doctors. So at large, this becomes most important. You document each and everything you communicate with people. You communicate whatever you have written on the paper. Okay, documentation of communication and communication of documentation. So document, document, and document, because only documents are going to be there when you go in the court. You may not remember ki 20 years ago which injection at what time I have given to that patient and whether he survived or not. If you have not done, if you have not written on the paper, you have not done it. These are the few case laws which we saw every for the consent related things which ideally you should take. This fourth number, Aruna Ben Kothari. No consent is required from relative for post-mortem in case of table death or for medical legal cases. But for that matter, see, there is nothing like medical legal case, which we say कि अरे पुलिस ने लाया है, अरे एक्सीडेंट है तो medical legal case है. No, 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 not at all. There is no terminology as such like medical legal case. But then, if there is some death in the hospital, post-mortem, and doctor thinks post-mortem had to be done, then he has to inform the police. That's all. Whether the post-mortem is to be done or not is the prerogative of the police. They have to decide and they will decide. So take-home message is consent is not just a procedural formality. It is a legal requirement, mandatory legal requirement. Consent may be invalid if detail is not explained well to the patient. Patient will always say, if complication happen, patient will always say कि मुझे तो ये समझ में ही नहीं आया था, तो डॉक्टर साहब ने इंग्लिश में बोला था, I don't know English, and this only happens each time. So you explain the patient in his own language. Ask him कि उसको समझ में आ गया है कि नहीं. Documentation and communication, and do not delegate the duties to junior, at least some specific or emergency or life-saving duties. So finally, who can give consent? Only patient can give consent except in case of unsound mind, unconscious patient, and a minor. And the most important slide now it comes. Never criticize your colleague. The root cause of all the violence and all the misery doctors and hospitals face is this thing. Patient goes to 2 or 3 or 4 doctors, and what I said, the communication may only 5 or 10%, 7 to 8% is the thing which you talk. All other 90% is your body language. How you treat, how you speak with the patient, how you speak about your colleague, how you say, suppose I got a X-ray of a fracture, which obviously is not good, or something wrong is done or happen, and I see the X-ray, patient has come for second opinion. अरे I do like the face like this. अरे ये क्या है, किसने किया है ऐसा, बहुत वेडा वाकडं तोंड केलं. पेशंटला लगेच कळणार. You may not say anything. Your face will show everything what the patient has to see. So never ever criticize your colleague, especially when he has come for second opinion. Mind your facial expressions, body language, as well as your language. Thank you. I think I will stop sharing the screen. एनी डाउट्स एनीबडी? हा मॅडम, हा बोला. झालं, संपलं, आता संपलं. हो. इफ एनीबडी हॅज एनी डाउट्स प्लीज. I think everybody is unmute. I don't know. Madam, please unmute everybody. If they have doubt, we may have a few words on that. Only 3 participants. Oh, here is something in the chat. Current point slide.
नमस्कार सर.
Hello.
नमस्कार. डॉक्टर
सर
आमकर
नमस्ते.
बोलतोय.
हा सर बोला.
सर, बऱ्याच वेळेला सर काय होतंय सर, आपल्याकडं एक प्रेग्नन्सी दाखवण्यासाठी इंटरनेटर मध्ये येतात आणि बऱ्याच वेळेला असं पण होतंय की त्यांचं एज कम्प्लीट नसते, 18 पूर्ण नसते.
हो.
मग अशा वेळेला काय ट्रीटमेंट त्यांना करायची का नाही करायची,
सर
हा
लाईफ
एक विषय
सेव्हिंग
होता.
असेल तर यू हॅव टू डू एव्हरीथिंग व्हॉट एव्हर यू कॅन.
ओके.
तुम्ही गायनाक आहात का सर?
नाही कसं आहे, मी बीएमएस आहे, पण बऱ्याच वेळेला आमच्याकडे जरा एएनसी येतात, परत ते ऊस तोडवाल्यांचे वगैरे येतात आणि ते
हो.
बऱ्याच वेळा त्यांचे आधार कार्ड नसते. मग अ, काहीतरी त्यांना ट्रीटमेंट करायची म्हटलं तर बऱ्याच वेळा काय होतंय की 18 पूर्ण नाही, ट्रीटमेंट का झाली असा पण विषय असतो ना बऱ्याच वेळेला.
सर
आम्ही
आधार कार्ड बघा, सर आधार कार्ड बघा आणि कधी कन्सेंट घेताना अंगठा घ्या.
हा.
आणि आधार कार्ड असल्याशिवाय सर काय आहे ना, एखाद दोन पेशंट गेलेले परवडेल, पण आपल्याला आयुष्यभर एखादा कोर्ट केस चाललेलं कधीच परवडणार नाही सर.
हो हो, नाही बरोबर आहे. म्हणून तर मी बऱ्याच वेळ मी अलीकडे काय केलं, आधार कार्ड असेल तरच या, आधार कार्ड नसले तर
नाही,
आम्हाला ट्रीटमेंट
ऍटलीस्ट
करता
फॉर
येत.
दॅट प्रोसिजर समजा गायनॅक किंवा अशा पोक्सो रिलेटेड केसेस आहे, एमटीपी आहे, तर त्या
हा.
ठिकाणी यू हॅव टू हॅव आधार कार्ड. कारण एक दिवस पण
ओके.
कमी असला तर कोर्टामध्ये
हा.
काय, एक दिवस कमी म्हणजे ही इज नॉट 18. रात्री 11 वाजेला एखादी प्रोसिजर झाली आणि त्याच दिवशी 12 वाजेला तो 18 वर्षाचा होणार आहे, तर तो एका
हा.
तासामध्ये मॅच्युअर होऊन जाणार आहे.
हा.
त्याला काही ऑप्शन नाही सर.
होय.
कॉम्प्लिकेटेड करण्यापेक्षा आपल्या कॉम्पिटिटरकडे पाठवून द्यायचं सर. ते पण खुश आणि आपण पण खुश.
बरं. नाही, परवा आमच्याकडे कशी केस आलती सर माहितीये काय, की प्रेग्नन्सी होतीये,
हां,
परंतु तिला 18 पूर्ण होते, परंतु तिचं कन्सेप्शन होतं ना ते 18च्या अगोदर होतं.
हां. मग कंप्लेंट केली का कोणी?
नाही, कंप्लेंट नाही केली. मी काय म्हटलं, डोक्याला झंझट नको म्हटलं, तू बाबा.
ते ठीक आहे सर. दॅट इज सर, इव्हन इव्हन इफ शी इज अ लीगली मॅरिड वाईफ, बट
हा.
लेस दॅन
येस.
18,
हा.
then that intercourse will come under POCSO if somebody complains.
येस येस येस.
कारण लीगली काय मॅरेज एज इज 18 इयर्स. आता आपल्याकडे अजूनही 14-14 वर्षाच्या मुलींचे लग्न होतात.
होय.
दॅट इज अ पोक्सो केस. पण मग काय कोणी कंप्लेंट करायला पाहिजे, मध्ये सगळं फॉलो झालं पाहिजे. मग कोणी ते मध्येच हे नको करायला सगळं. पोक्सो इज अ व्हेरी स्पेशल ॲक्ट. फारच स्ट्रिक्ट आहे.
होय,
त्यामुळे
पोक्सो ऍक्ट आहे.
हो, त्या ठिकाणी रिलेटेड असेल तिथे आपण आधार कार्ड घ्यायलाच पाहिजे. आणि आता बऱ्याच गायनॅकवाल्यांनी किंवा बरेच जण ॲटलीस्ट गायनॅकवाले तरी आता नोटीसच लावून दिली, की आधार कार्ड घेऊन या. आणि दुसरी अजून एक गोष्ट मला सांगायला आवडेल सर, की अंगठा घ्या सहीच्या ऐवजी किंवा सही आणि
अंगठा.
अंगठा फॉर एव्हरीथिंग, सही अँड अंगठा.
सही आणि अंगठा.
येस.
लेफ्ट हँड सर कुठला असं पाहिजे, असं काय काय कुठला पण
असं काही
चालतोय?
स्पेसिफिक नाहीये सर, पण लेडीज युजुअली जेंट्सचं राइट वापरतात, लेडीजचं लेफ्ट. मला माहित नाही काय रिझन आहे.
बर बर बर. ओके
पण मग
ओके.
काय ना, अंगठा यू कॅनॉट रिफ्यूज. सही केली ना, मी सांगेल नाही नाही, ही डॉक्टर गणेश आहे त्यांची सही आहे. मी तर केलीच नव्हती.
हा, अंगठा
अंगठा
रिक्वेस्ट,
ॲटलीस्ट
बरोबर.
अंगठा असला की पेशंटला थोडं प्रेशर राहतं. अरे नाही, फिंगरप्रिंट आपण दिलेले आहेत, व्हॉटएव्हर.
ओके ओके.
शंका आली केव्हाही विचारा सर, काही प्रॉब्लेम नाही. जेवढं मला सांगता येईल मी नक्की सांगेल.
बरोबर. सर, आता ओपीडी बेसला ना, आम्ही बऱ्याच वेळेला आमचं रजिस्टर असतंय,
हां.
रजिस्टर मध्ये नाव, डायग्नोसिस आणि त्यांना ओपीडी बेसला जे काय मेडिसिन दिलं ते लिहितोय.
हो.
बर. तर ओपीडी बेसला रजिस्टर इट्स ओके चालतं का केस पेपर सिस्टीम पाहिजे तरी?
नाही सर, काहीतरी रेकॉर्ड पाहिजे आपल्याकडे बस. जे तुम्ही केस पेपरवर लिहिणार आहात, तेच जर तुम्ही
हां,
रजिस्टरमध्ये लिहिलेलं असेल दॅट इज इनफ.
हां.
पण मग ते तुम्ही सांभाळून ठेवायला पाहिजे.
नाही, नाही. ते काय रजिस्टर सांभाळून ठेवतोय आम्ही.
हां.
ते नाव, डायग्नोसिस, त्यात मग ब्लड प्रेशर वगैरे ते सगळं लिहितोय असं. आणि
हो.
पुढं डायग्नोसिस लिहून झालं तर आपण ट्रीटमेंट लिहितोय.
काय मेडिसिन दिलेत ते.
ते लिहितोय. हो. मग ते
हो.
तेवढं इनफ आहे का
दॅट इज
म्हणजे केस
इनफ, दॅट इज
पेपर?
इनफ. ओपीडी लेव्हलला दॅट इज इनफ. पण मग हे सगळे डॉक्युमेंट सांभाळून ठेवा. म्हणजे आता आयडियली ओपीडी रेकॉर्ड शुड बी प्रिझर्व्ह फॉर 3 इयर्स.
येस. ओके.
पण आता तुम्ही ते लाईफ लाँग ठेवा. काहीच बिघडत नाही एक रजिस्टर माळ्यावर पडून राहिल्याने.
हो, हो.
ॲटलीस्ट आपण तुम्ही आहात तोपर्यंत, आपण आहोत तोपर्यंत. पुढचं माहीत नाही. कारण कोण केव्हा काय आता माझ्याकडे एक पेशंट आता आमच्याकडे एक प्लास्टिक सर्जन आहे सर. एक
येस सर.
पेशंट इथे छोटासा कट होता. तेवढ्या कटसाठी
हं,
ओपिनियन घ्यायला त्यांच्याकडे गेले होते. नुसतं अगदी मायनर काहीतरी असेल आणि 6-8 महिन्यानंतर त्यांना इंदोर कोर्टातून नोटीस आली, समन आला, की तुम्ही या पेशंटची ट्रीटमेंट केली, तुम्ही या.
हं,
आता तो पेशंट ॲडमिट होता दुसऱ्याकडे, तिसऱ्याकडे प्लास्टिक सर्जन नुसता स्कार असल्यामुळे त्यांनी एकदा दाखवलं. सर म्हणतील, "मी ओपीडी बेसिसवर पाहिलं यार, मी काय-काय सांगू आता तिने मारलंय का, कोणी मारलंय का काय?" हे केव्हाही काही त्रास होतो. म्हणजे त्यात तथ्य काही
ओके.
नसतं. पेशंटला काय सगळ्यांना त्रास द्यायचा असतो त्यामुळे तो काही करतो. पण मग आपला वेळ, आपलं सगळं वाया जातं, एनर्जी, क्रेडिबिलिटी आणि दिवसेंदिवस
नाही
जास्त
तसं माझ्याकडे रेकॉर्ड सर एक 8-10 वर्षाचा आहे मागच्या. सगळं मी मेंटेन
राहू द्या,
करून
राहू द्या
ठेवलंय.
सर. पडू द्या माळ्यावर. काही बिघडत नाही. फक्त अधून-मधून चेक करत राहा बस.
हो, हो. नाही कारण की काय झालं परवा मला पण एक समन्स आलते ह्याच्यातून कोर्टातून आलते की तुमच्याकडे एक पेशंट दाखवायला आले होते.
मॅडम
त्याला
रेकॉर्डिंग बंद
ब्रेथलेस
करून टाका.
काय सर?
एक मिनिट. हां.